Welcome, everybody, to Patriots Law Group Live. These are legal strategies for military divorce. If you are a veteran, active duty, or a military spouse, and you are working, kind of trying to navigate a military divorce right now, well, you are in the right place. We have Mike Lyons and Patrick Hughes, our attorneys and legal specialists in military divorce. We come to you every second and fourth week of the month, bringing you various education, resources, tips, and insights to help you navigate this process and this difficult time. And we bring you a different topic. And today's is very, very important. These are 5 critical actions that you need to be aware of to secure your military pension. So this is protecting your financial future. And so we take the next 30 minutes and we're going to dive into this topic. So Mike, welcome today.
Thank you, Maureen. Good to see you.
And, it's good to see you too. And Pat, welcome. We are so glad to, have your knowledge today. And over the 30 minutes, we usually go right down to the wire. So I want to dive right into this conversation to present some of this education. So who would like to take the first critical action to secure the financial future for our audience today?
I will go first. It's been a couple of times since I've been working with you all. Sorry, Mike, leaving you solo.
We've missed you, Pat. Yeah, I will tell you, we have missed you.
Well, I was out in Germany with some military duty, and here we are. We're back. We're ready to go. But one of the first things that we wanted to talk about when we're talking about securing a military pension is that the matter is filed in the right state. We've talked about it before, but in a little more detail, there's federal law and there's state law. And the military pension is based on federal law, which preempts the ability for the states to do things unless the federal law says it's okay. And there's this statute, 10 United States Code, Section 1408, that says that you cannot divide a military pension for a military member unless they either reside in that state because of some reason not related to their military assignment, that is 2, either that or their domicile, or 3, that they've consented to that jurisdiction. And so it's important to know, 1, where do they live, what's their domicile, and there's the possibility that a service member could fight and say that jurisdiction lacks. And if that were to occur, then it would be important to get the facts through discovery for their basis. If you've already filed in a state, for their basis for why they're asserting that could then potentially attack that and allow for that matter to proceed. But really the main thing is file in the right state to start. But if you don't, then at least pursue in discovery to get the basis for why someone is saying that military pension couldn't be divided in that state. Because otherwise, again, as we've talked in the past, you could end up wasting a whole bunch of money and time in the wrong jurisdiction when someone's interested in trying to get the pension divided, and then they find out months later that they can't after a whole host of attorney's fees.
Ooh, and then they have to start completely over.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And the money is lost first time around.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. Pat brings up a good point. One of the ways I've dealt with this in the past is asking the question, whenever it's a little fuzzy, asking the question directly in discovery. If you dispute, jurisdiction to divide your pension, state exactly why. And basically what you're getting is most of the time it's going to be, no, I don't dispute it, or they don't really understand the issue. So they're like, I don't have a problem. And that will be your golden ticket. But if they are going to dispute it, then they have to tell you that right then and there. And that's at the beginning of the case rather than long after it's too late. So I think that's a really great idea that Pat has suggested, and something that I was able to use to great effect in some of my cases.
Great. All right. So number 2, what is the next action?
Yeah. This is way down in the nitty gritty. So most people are really surprised to learn that only 50% of a military pension can be given to former spouses, and I say that with an S, right? If it's only one spouse, 50% is what everybody would expect being the max, because the service member gets the other 50%. But if there is more than one spouse, there's a possibility that the service member has given away some portion of their pension already. And the federal law on this is first in time, first in right. So if spouse one somehow negotiated a great deal and got 50% of the military pension, then spouse two, who comes along and thinks, well, we were married during half of the service, and so I'm entitled to half of whatever portion that is, so 25%, is very surprised to learn that when they present it to DFAS, even though all the other laws and requirements and jurisdiction and math is done correctly, that there's nothing left to be paid to them. So a good tip here to secure your rights as a former spouse in the military pension is to basically, what you're going to want to do is to ask in discovery what share, if any, has been awarded to a former spouse. And that will clear it up right away. You may even ask for the prior divorce decree.
Wow. So the second spouse may end up getting nothing.
Potentially.
Nothing. Right. Right. And who wouldn't negotiate 50% in the first one? Like, why would you negotiate anything less? Right?
Well, now most of the time, what you negotiate is half of the marital share. So thinking if the marital share is 10 out of 20, then half of that is what people are dividing. So think of it as 25% of the full pension. Does that make sense? So it's actually it would be an odd scenario for this to happen, but it's not an impossible one. The way that it more likely than not happens is somebody says, I'm going to give you a fixed amount of money from my pension rather than a percentage. And then because of disability and survivor benefits all shrinking the pie, it finds itself in a situation where that fixed amount of money eats up far more than what would have been the marital share. And that second spouse, not knowing that, is surprised.
And then it gets less and less with each spouse.
Right. Yeah.
So if you're going to have 5 of them, they better be aware that there may not be anything left.
You're fifth in line. Do the research.
All right. Well, that is great information for military spouses to definitely know. That's great. But the military person is safe because they're going to keep 50% regardless. Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. They have security in their financial future there. So very important. All right. Number 3, Pat, are you on?
Yeah, I am on. And Mike was talking about the shrinking of the pie with respect to the survivor benefit plan. And that's why it would be important to speak with a financial planner to figure out if that's something that's even worth pursuing. The SBP has a 6.5% premium that will reduce the retirement pay. So you have to pay into that. And so any share that would be attributed to the former spouse would be reduced by some percentage if the full amounts sought. That full premium is going to be 6.5%. And if that is negotiated and it's on the former spouse, non-military spouse, to have to pay the full premium, then that's going to have a significant reduction to what someone would receive as the military pension, the retired disposable pay. And then if you marry and you're less than 55 years old, remarrying will turn the SPP off. and also the situation where maybe life insurance is better situation as compared to SBP. Those are all things that a financial planner would know in comparing the benefits and negatives to whether someone should get the SBP. It should be noted also that you're only going to get 55% if you get the full amount. You're only going to get 55% of that retired pay that you were receiving before the death of the service member. So you're not going to get the full amount that you had been receiving. You're only going to get 55% of it. So for all those reasons, there may be better avenues to pursue versus the SBP.
You're right. This was the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
Good to know these details. A lot of people would miss this. And when we talk about you being like the military specialist in this military divorce, this is what we're saying is important. And we talk about everybody's case being different, and everybody, have to, to really look at that. But this is important. Really good information. And I want to say to everybody out there, this is live. And live can be messy. We're not in a formal studio. And I want to say I've got an enormous amount of birds in my backyard. I just left the beach. I came back to Annapolis in a house, and it is actually louder. So if you're hearing the birds, I really apologize for this. And I'm hoping it's not being picked up dramatically here, but it's, and I think now I've got a cat here, but anyway, we're going to work through this. So,
very soothing, no problem.
we're working through, but I just wanted to say, live is wonderful for so many reasons. We're so authentic here, but all right. So let's get back on track. We've got number 3, Mike.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe we're on number 4, but I'm going to mention
number 4.
Number 4, yeah. I'm going to mention too on what Pat said. I recently, about a week or two ago, near the office we have near Andrews is next to a First Command Financial, and I was chatting with the manager of that, and we started going into, just as our conversation, some of these topics, because I mentioned that we were doing these types of LinkedIns, and he really started to go down into the details from a financial perspective. And I came away from that thinking, really every former military spouse, because those are the ones that need the SBP, should be talking with somebody like him, somebody like First Command, because they know military like we know military, and they're the specialists on the financial side, and they can help make those decisions on the cost basis. Is it best for you to be getting an insurance policy, or is it best for you to be getting survivor benefits? We had talked in the past about survivor benefits. You lose it, and Pat may have mentioned this too, but you lose it if you are a former spouse who gets remarried prior to the age of 55. Well, you don't want to pay into something for years and years, get remarried, and then not get anything out of it. An insurance policy, on the other hand, doesn't have that aspect. So anyhow, I just wanted to share that I came away from that conversation going, wow, here's another resource that really can be brought to the fight. And I don't want to give direct advice to anybody, but this isn't legal advice. So I'm going to say everybody should talk with a financial advisor when they're considering survivor benefits. All right. So jumping into the topic I wanted to mention, we do a lot of pension division orders. One of the things that other firms and attorneys will actually bring us into their case to assist with reviewing separation or settlement agreement, to determine, is this language appropriate? And then also those pension division orders. And sometimes the information we need to either prepare the order or to be sure it's correct is not available because no one thought to ask for it during this discovery period. That would be the duty history and the pay history for the service member, because DFAS requires you to state in the order how much credible time has has occurred up to the date of divorce towards a retirement, and then what is the average pay over the 3 years leading up to the day of the divorce. And so during discovery, it's just as easy as typing one more sentence to the discovery request. And what discovery is, we've mentioned before, is in litigation, each party is required to answer requests for information and documents, and that's would be this discovery stuff. After the case is done, you don't really have any good way to ask for that information short of complaining that somebody's in contempt of court, which could take months and months and months and cost you several $1,000s more. So this is a super easy, stitch in time saves 9 type of a piece of advice here, but it's recommended that all duty and pay information of the service member be collected at the beginning of the case in discovery. So at the end of the case, a pension order can be prepared.
So I have a question here. When we're talking about pensions, we're really talking about people who have been in the military, 20 years, 30 years? We're not talking about people who have only been in there 5, 10 years. They don't receive pensions. Am I correct about that? So the younger marriages don't even have this issue. Am I correct?
Yes and no. Very frequently, if it's a short marriage, the parties in the court may sort of view it either trading other assets or view it as not equitable to award it. And people are willing to trade because a lot of service members get out before 20, and you do get 0. You're 100% correct on that.
Mm-hmm.
More than, I would say, 5, 6, 7, that's probably the gray area. But more than those number of years, everybody's fighting for it just in case. So if it doesn't happen, no one got anything, not the service member, not the former spouse. If it does happen, then the former spouse gets their share. So, but you're correct, it's not a vested pension until you get to 20 years. But we still do divide the contingent benefit in case it does come to be.
So could I ask another question? And I don't know if this is another another tangent but medical is so critical today and it costs a lot of money. Do people also use that as an asset or a benefit to negotiate as part of retirement or pensions in order to get healthcare benefits as well?
Pat, do you want to chime in or you want me to?
Yeah, well, I might, because I actually segues to kind of the fifth thing that we wanted to talk about.
Oh, is that part? Am I doing a perfect segue to look at that as an asset, like a car? No, forget. I don't want the car. I want lifetime benefits.
That's a very good segue. No kidding. And you didn't. I don't think you even knew that you were doing that. That's great. So there's a number of different rules, we'll say, that exist out there. 3 come into mind. There's the 10-10 rule. And there's the 20-20-15 rule, I think it is, and the 20-20-20 rule. And the latter of those two, 20-20-20 rule, we'll talk about that. The number of years that someone served within the military overlapping with the number of years that someone's been married. If we can get all of those to be at or greater than 20, then we can satisfy that 20-20-20 rule where a former spouse upon divorce can retain TRICARE for life, just like a military retiree would. And they would get commissary access, they would get medical, and they'd get other things to include the military pension division and all those things that are commonly part of a divorce. And then if there's a 15-year overlap with the marriage and the military member's service, meaning that the spouse, the divorcing spouse, the former spouse, was married to the member for 15 years while the member was in service for 15 years or more, then I think that they get a year of health care. Right, Mike? And then,
yeah, that's right.
And so there's really no way for the military member, him or herself, to say, hey, I'll give you, unless it's negotiated for paying someone's premiums, I suppose, for something outside of TRICARE. There's no way to secure TRICARE for life unless you meet those requirements, those particular rules of the 20-year overlap or the 15-year overlap. So with respect to medical care, if that's the exact question, those are criteria that needs to be met for someone to retain the TRICARE health insurance that was part of their marriage throughout the time that military member was serving. And then there's also a 10-10 rule, which has nothing to do with medical care, but it has to do with receiving payment directly from DFAS for any military pension that is divided. You can imagine that might be an important thing. If things didn't end well, or even if they did, you're still having to rely on your former spouse, the military member, to pay you directly, versus DFAS having the authority under the law because of a 10-year marriage that overlapped with 10 years worth of military service, now permitting DFAS to pay the former spouse directly, and to account for every year's worth of cost of living allowances that come with a military pension. All of these things that are calculations that DFAS will do automatically, and you won't have to rely on your now divorcee to ensure frequent monthly payments and calculations of costs of living and all of those things that would be part of the situation if you did not get to a 10-year overlap of marriage with the military service. So that was kind of answering your question, but also segueing to the point that we were trying to raise in this fifth item, is that you can imagine why it would be important, having said all those things, why it might be prudent not to file too early or to settle too early if you're right on the cusp of reaching those milestones. So if you're in the 9th year and you're not so far from the 10th year, or if you're in the 19th year and you're not so far from the 20th year, and these benefits exist to your advantage if you were to wait before being divorced until you've reached those milestones, the 10-year or the 15-year or the 20-year milestone, it would be something that someone who wasn't aware of these would very likely just say, hey, all right, let's get this done. I know you want it over, and so let's get it done. Whereas someone who's knowledgeable of these things could look at it and thinking, in the large grand scheme of things, you still kind of need to be separated from this person. You're just going to have to wait a couple extra months and we'll get you to this important milestone, and so that's something that I think you could see a lot of people unaware of those milestones and those benefits that exist, overlooking and just doing what the client says that he or she wants, but without being able to advise them on why it might be important to wait just a little bit longer.
Yeah. And Maureen, sometimes you will see a scenario. It's normally the former spouse giving something up in order to remain married, like Pat was mentioning, to get to 20. So because the law being what the law is now, you can get it divorced as a matter of right, and so if you're 2.5 years away, that's where I kind of feel like I see this in that 2-3 years, because you can see it's like one assignment, and that's how us service members think, is last assignment type, right? It's there, I can see it now. And so occasionally there'll be an agreement that says, hey, you can keep more of our joint savings account if you allow us to get or remain married for that 2.5 years, so I get that benefit. It's very important if that happens, because we see service members, unfortunately, who come into us and say, hey, for the last 3 or 4 years, we knew we wanted to get divorced, but I agreed to stay married nothing in writing, but agreed to stay married so we could get this benefit, and then filed for divorce and gets frustrated because the former spouse is saying, the marital share is the 20 years, not the 16 years. And they're saying, hey, I would have just thought I was doing a good deed, and I'm now being punished for it. So if you and your spouse were thinking about that, it's wise to talk to legal assistance or a lawyer to make sure you really set it up the way that it's intended to be. And that could be a marital separation agreement that settles everything and fixes everything calculated as of year 16, but that keeps the parties married until 20. So I have seen that, and it can be perilous ground.
And these little nuances that people are not aware of. And when we talk about specializing in military divorce and really getting into that nitty-gritty, this is what we're talking about. This is where those little details that can be overlooked can make a huge difference, for people. So, 5 incredibly important points. I mean, this is about money. Let's talk about it. I mean, this is about, financially securing your future on, not just for the active military person. I mean, this is also for the spouse. This is for the community. It's for, dependent children too, who is getting custody, who can afford, a future for this too. So, great information. And, Mike, we've talked about, the fact that this is an educational program, right? This is to give insights. It's to give resources out there. But I know you want to also let the community who's tuning in here to, kind of give a little bit of a disclaimer that we talked about, right?
Yeah.
Let people know that, do you want to share that?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned it, because that is something we want to make sure of. This is such a complex area that every fact of each individual's case has to be considered in its totality of the case. And so I would not recommend or think it's at all prudent for anybody to just try to run with these isolated sort of tips and experiences that we're talking about. There's free legal assistance for service members and their dependents, so former spouses, children, and that can actually include people other than spouses, a adult, a parent, for instance. But in any event, and there's lots of attorneys that are available that this information can be brought to and say, hey, listen, I heard this. Can you help me apply it? We're also, of course, available, but our real aim is to help the service members, the military community, much more broadly than our own team could handle and help, given just resource limitations. So I'm glad you mentioned that. The biggest tip we can give you is have good counsel that knows what they're doing, supplement it with this information, and you should be in a good place.
Awesome. And of course, if they want to reach out to either of you and your amazing law firm, they can go to patriotslawgroup.com and talk to somebody to go ahead and work with you and your team. So for those of you out there, if you like what you've heard and you have a real connection with Mike and Pat, please reach out to them. You can also find them obviously on LinkedIn, and we're also on Facebook. We've also been streaming on YouTube, so we really hope that you'll come back in a couple of weeks with another amazing topic. And we really appreciate you tuning in, and we really hope that this information has been helpful for you, because that's what we're here for. This is really resource focused, education focused, and we really hope that we can help you during this difficult time. So we will be back in a couple of weeks, and we thank you for tuning in, and thanks Mike and Pat for great information. So see everybody soon. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye. Thank you.